And now I'm going to toss a question back at you, Jared. What, like, we're having a crystal night. Like, this is a celebration of crystals. And so what is a crystal anyway?
A crystal is anything that has an orderly structure. Has an orderly structure. So, as an example,
not my studio.
No, not this, not your studio. So, just as an example, something with an orderly structure that many people probably can just recognize: a quartz crystal. And what makes it a crystal is the atomic structure is replicated, and if you were able to see it, you would see that's how the atoms are arranged. So that's the basics of it, and lots of things fall into that category of a crystal structure. So that's orderly.
That's the best succinct definition of crystal I think I've ever heard, except for Kyle's.
A crystal is the way that it is because the way that it is. I said it better earlier. You can tell that it's a crystal by the way that it is.
There you go. Sold. Yeah. And so I think that you brought along some pretty cool interesting crystals that now are these crystals that follow the directions of being a crystal well, or are these like bad boy rebel crystals?
I would say that they are a little bit of an outlier as far as what people think of when you think of crystals. I mean, most people are thinking of your quartz and amethyst. Maybe some people are thinking of pyrite. Pyrite's a popular one where, if you're to take that really nice electron microscope and you could see those atoms, it would be little cubes until you get to a visual scale. So what I have here is I have some magnetite crystals, and magnetite's it's an interesting one. It's a octahedral crystal.
I'm so glad
iron.
that you were the one that wanted to say that.
And it's not something that you would typically think of, but as you can clearly see, we have clear orderly fashion to the crystals. I think it's also kind of interesting because it has a lot of industrial uses, or at least it did at one point in time. Magnetite back in, I think it was like 1930, 1931, they were in Germany, they were grinding it up and making audio tapes out of it. So like the magnetic tape. So like it's both kind of aesthetically pleasing when you have the crystals, because magnetite is usually just in a big mass, right? But like basically almost everything can form an orderly crystal structure if it has the room to do so. A good example of that would be feldspars, right? So your granites, the pink in that is feldspar. So quartz, feldspar, and biotite makes up almost all granites. And granite, it's a magma chamber that has cooled down, and it cooled really slow, and there's not a lot of space in there, right? So that's why you don't have a very nice orderly structure being built, because there's no space. And then when you do have space, you have something like this, an orthoclase feldspar, and these are, they're big, and you can kind of see that we have this crystal structure in here. This would be when you have the space for it to grow. And that's kind of the real basics of crystals. I mean, the bigger the crystal, the more time it took to grow, and the bigger the space, bigger the cavity that it had to grow in. So and that kind of just starts with minerals dissolved in water. Ions precipitate out, and you start things growing out there. That's the man. Hopefully nobody that's a crystal expert listens to my explanation here, because that's the cliff notes. That's the cliff notes of how crystals form. But like the orthoclase feldspars, like these are really, really neat. They have a monoclinic crystal structure. They're very, very easily identified. Actually, I picked this up in Montana. So
Aw.
yeah.
Shout out to
So-
Theo, who's still
Yeah,
in
Theo,
Florida.
home state pass, buddy. But yeah, there are lots of things come in a crystalline form that maybe you don't think of. And I think your feldspars, your magnetites are certainly that. I mean, still to this day, I have these. I have a ton of crystals that aren't showy crystals, but they're not what I think of when somebody says a crystal.
Again,
Yeah.
I respectfully disagree because those magnetite crystals are beautiful.
Well, thank you.
They're
Thank
they're
you.
Kyle's best friend, though. Everybody has to know. How come, Kyle? Why are
Because that's where the fire obsidian gets its color from nanocrystallized magnetite. It's obsidian, but that super thin layer, I mean, super thin. Everyone should
It's a
already know this by
dusting.
now. Yeah, I think dusting would even be considered too thick. I mean, it's almost like oil on water. It's just like, it's so thin, just super thin. But nanocrystallized magnetite, that's where it gets its color from.
I didn't know that. Didn't know that about that. That's interesting.
Cheers.
I should try to find a really small piece that's thin enough to see if you can put on underneath your microscope and see if we can get some pictures of it.
That would be cool.
Somebody
it
sent
would
me a
have to be under her
piece.
microscope.
I also need both a piece. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that somebody like you has sent me a piece. I should put that.
Oh
under the
yeah, that's right. I
microscope.
did, didn't I?
Yeah. Oh, I should
Yeah.
have totally feigned ignorance and gotten another piece. What am I talking about here?
Oh, dang it.
Yeah, missed opportunity. Well, I'll see if that's thin enough, and if not, gosh,
I have a bunch of like
maybe
When
smaller.
a thin section
Yeah.
of nano
Right?
magnetite.
That's what needs to happen
That's what
when
it
I
is.
master thin sections. You see, here's my deal. They made them before there were thin section machines.
Mhm.
Back in Vantage, Washington, when what's the guy's name? Discovered the whole petrified forest there. He was
Mhm.
making thin sections on a machine. So I can do it,
You can do it by hand.
right?
Just got
Oh
grind
my
down.
gosh. Talk about never being bored. Like sanding.
I'm a DJ.
Yeah. 2 sandpapers and a microphone. Yeah. Sorry. So
No,
sorry.
that was good.
Okay. Yeah, show yourself out now. So continue though. That was like you were on a roll. Like you had feldspars and porphyry happening
yeah, I guess I just wanted to show some crystals that are classic, well-defined crystals, but people don't usually think about